Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Monday, the 19th of March, 2018. And as you can see, it's an absolutely glorious morning here. There's still a little bit of a bite in the wind, and you can see the remnants of the snow, and I'm sure that if you're anywhere down the eastern side of the country, it's a very similar outlook for you. But the weather is due to improve, so hopefully communications are almost back to normal. Well, I would have been down in London today, but I have a commitment this evening, which I'll talk about later. But today, it's very, very important, if you are anywhere in London or the southeast, that you make your way along to the Royal Courts, I would say, of Justice, but I'll hold that in abeyance right now. But to the Royal Courts anyway, in Fetter Lane, London. The nearest tube station is Chancery Lane, because there at 10:30 this morning, UCOG are seeking to get the most heinous injunction put in place. This injunction, if it is successful, will literally kill off any free speech in this country, because this injunction goes further than the INEOS injunction or the Europa injunction, in that it looks to shut down any comment that might have an impact on their economic viability. Now, this is extremely rich, coming from a company that has in the past employed the dodgy David Lenegas, who effectively is persona non gratis with the alternative investment market, because of the proven cases where he has blagged in an attempt to talk up the stock price of dog companies, not least UCOG. Now, the stock price of UCOG at the moment wallows around about 1.6 pence, and it's had significant chunks of its market capitalization wiped out, as the media and the unfortunate punters that have put their life savings into this company realise that they've been taken for a mug. So Stephen Sanderson, who is the CEO of UCOG, seeking to literally shut down observation and comment, which in his opinion would have a negative impact on the company. Well, let me serve notice. I've already done it before, but let me serve notice again. If that element of the injunction is upheld in the courts, then I take great delight in stating that I would hold that ruling in absolute contempt. And I will make it my business every single day to dig as deep as I possibly can into the affairs of UCOG, and I will expose every shenanigan that this company, and of course it will expose others as well, that they get up to in a desperate attempt to convince mug punters to put their life savings into these dog companies. So it's a very important day. I mean, obviously this has been done in collusion with the Metropolitan Police, and we know that the Metropolitan Police are working with other police forces around the country. They don't want to be using their resources for corporate enforcement. So what they're looking to do is find other ways to prevent lawful protest, what is currently lawful protest against these companies' activities. So they're seeking to get injunctions. Now, of course, what this does mean ultimately is that those people who have assets have to stay very well away from the front line. But those of us who have nothing, then basically we are your worst nightmare, UCOG, INEOS, Europa, and any other company that seeks to attempt to shut down the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression, and certainly the freedom to expose your industry for the magnitude of the devastation that it causes wherever it manages to get a foothold. So, keep shooting yourselves in the foot. Keep scoring those own goals, because it only serves to awaken even more people to the magnitude of your criminality. So that's today, Fetters Lane, And I gather that the injunction is going to be challenged by the Wheeled Action Group, who have some outstanding legal representation. And I also gather that there's a number of individuals who will be standing up to make it very clear that they will not be stifled in their criticism of this industry. So that's the Rolls Building at Fetter Lane in London. As I said, the nearest tube station is Chancery Lane. It's about a 5-minute walk from Chancery Lane tube station. So if you can get along to get into the hearing, then obviously please do so. If not, get along to join the band of people that will be outside seeking to raise awareness about this injunction. Now, the reason I won't be there is because I have a commitment tonight. It's one of my increasingly rare public speaking appearances, and I shall be at Bolsover, and I shall be at the Bolsover Assembly Rooms for an event there. The title of the talk is "We Are Going to Be Fracked Unless We Make a Stand," and we'll be talking about the role of communities in shutting down this abomination, and we'll be looking at the successes that have been achieved by communities, and looking at the way in which those communities have come together to resist the onslaught by the unconventional gas industry. So that's at the Bolsover Assembly Rooms on the hilltop, and that's kicking off at 7:30. So, meanwhile, what else is going on? Well, a North Derbyshire MP, Lee Rowley, who vehemently opposed INEOS's application to drill exploratory wells in his constituency. And by the way, he's a Tory MP, but he was elected in the last year's election, 2015 election, on the back of his opposition to fracking. And he replaced the pro-fracking Labour MP, Natasha Engels, who now, by the way, is on the INEOS payroll, so, you know, revolving doors and all that. Anyway, Lee Rowley, of course, currently still keeping his head firmly above the parapet in his anti-fracking stance. So clearly the Tory party whips haven't got enough photographs of him in compromising positions yet to bring him back in line. So, Lee Rowley, good on you, my friend, and let it be known that you have a lot of support, not just from within your constituency, but within the grassroots Tory movement right across the country. And he's now been appointed to head up the all-party parliamentary group, which is going to look at and explore and debate the legislation, policy, regulation and data regarding shale gas exploration and extraction in the UK and abroad. Now, of course, the last person to have a similar position or similar role was Kevin Hollinsnake, the MP for North Yorkshire, who was put in place to take over from Anne McIntosh. And Kevin Hollinsnake, I guess that somebody does have some very compromising photographs of him, because he does nothing except trot out the party line, despite overwhelming opposition of his views by his constituents. Well, he was caught seriously short last week, seeking to take advantage of the supposed Russian chemical attack, which, by the way, nobody outside of the establishment believes. There's not a shred of Harvard evidence in the public domain. But Kevin Hollinsnake, seeking to take advantage of the situation, tweeted out, "What can we do about Russia? We could ban their gas imports and produce more of our own." Well, Kevin got seriously slapped, as did a number of other MPs who were also seeking to gain cheap political points. And they got slapped by none other than the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which of course is headed up by Greg Clark. And he tweeted out, in response to Kevin's claim about Russian gas, Greg Clark tweeted out, "Great Britain benefits from highly diverse and flexible sources of gas supply. Less than 1% of our gas comes from Russia, and we are in no way reliant upon it." Well, people who have watched my updates on a regular basis will know that this information is freely available in the public domain. It's freely available from the government's own website and their own statistics. So, of course, the vast majority of MPs hope and rely on the fact that most people don't do their own research, and that they can just put out any old crud and that people will believe it hook, line and sinker. Well, fortunately, an increasing number of people are realising that the easiest way to tell when a politician's lying is if their lips are moving, and consequently they are doing their own research and not simply taking what is pumped out as orthodoxy. So, what else is going on? Well, I'm going to change tack a little bit here, because although, up until now I have focused very much on fracking, but it's starting to become increasingly evident that, obviously fracking is simply the thin end of a very fat wedge. And some 20 odd miles away from where I'm standing right now, the city of Sheffield is under assault by a local authority and the contractor that they have employed to decimate the city's trees. Now, I'm sure that everyone watching this has been sort of following this and seen the local resistance and the brutal behaviour of the security personnel employed by the contractor, while the police simply watch from a distance. Well, South Yorkshire police, don't have a great track record, do they? And unfortunately, that seems to be continuing as they just ignore what's occurring literally in front of their eyes. Well, people have asked the question, why are these trees being felled when it's clear that the majority of the trees that are being felled are healthy? There's not a problem with them, there's no evidence of disease, yet whole streets are having their trees removed. Well, finally, the British media this weekend has stated, not directly, but has stated and given an indication as to the reason that Sheffield's trees are being removed. And a number of people have made this observation previously, but it's been dismissed as rampant conspiracy. But now it's formally acknowledged that the reason that trees are being removed, not just in Sheffield in the UK, but in cities right across the US, is because of the impact that the foliage has on 5G Wi-Fi signals. And the next generation of internet connectivity, 5G, is going to be operating on a frequency bandwidth that is seriously and negatively affected by not just the foliage, but even, would you believe, the raindrops on leaves. So consequently, what's occurring right now is, surreptitiously, the trees are being removed to protect the integrity of the 5G rollout. Because otherwise what's going to happen is the 5G is going to be launched, and basically people are going to go, what a crock, this doesn't work. Well, it won't work if there's a tree in the way between the radio transmitter, the Wi-Fi transmitter, and your receiver. And of course it's exacerbated between March and September when the trees are in full foliage. So just as this fracking nightmare could potentially start with just one well, this decimation of trees in cities and towns throughout the UK will start with Sheffield. And of course, the government is not about to start felling trees in every city at one time, because that's a bit too obvious. So Sheffield is the experiment. It's the experiment to see how gullible the population are and how malleable the population are in terms of being encouraged to simply ignore it, to go about their normal day-to-day business where they leave work in the morning, living in a beautiful tree-lined avenue, and return home in the evening to clear skies. Well, some may say, well, they actually wanted more light in their windows. But, when a council is looking to fell almost half. Apparently the contract with Amy is to remove 17,500 trees and replace them at a rate of not less than 200 a year. So if that's 200 a year, then that's 5 times 17, so that's 85 years to get even close to replacing the trees that Amy are now taking down at a remarkable rate of knots. So, ignore what's going on in Sheffield at your peril, because it's going to move to your community. So if you live in the UK, in a city, and that city is currently tree lined, then you either start to take an interest in what's going on in Sheffield right now, or in the not too distant future, your trees are going to be removed too. And this, of course, is very much connected with the Internet of Things. Now, I'm sure that many people watching this are hearing that phrase for the first time, the Internet of Things. But some of us have been talking about this for, some years now. And if you search Internet of Things and humanity versus insanity, you'll see a program that I did with Pippa King some time ago. I think probably about a couple of years ago, looking at how the agenda is literally to connect everything to the internet, even to the extent of the tags in the clothes that you're wearing, and potentially literally being able to be followed down the street on the basis that that item of clothing that you purchased with your credit card, which of course then links you to that item of clothing, and you can then be tracked down the street. So I know it sounds outrageous, it sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel, and of course the vast majority of people are expected to simply dismiss it because it is so outrageous, it's beyond their bounds of perception. Yet this is being rolled out at a phenomenal rate of knots, and it's things like the removal of the trees in Sheffield that will hopefully stimulate people to do their own research. And everything that's unfolding right now was scripted a long time ago. In fact, much of what is happening right now was scripted in the 1930s in a document called Technocracy Inc., written by Howard Scott and Marion King Hubbard. And Marion King Hubbard, of course, is attributed with the presentation in 1957, where he first introduced the concept of peak oil. And that was, of course, to create or sow the seeds of artificial scarcity. Then that document was picked up by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who effectively paraphrased it in a book that he wrote in 1969 called Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era, in which he talks about how a technocratic elite would effectively completely ignore traditional liberal values to ensure their absolute control over the wider population. So, and it was that book, by the way, that got him into the view of the Rockefellers, and from the early 1970s onwards he was on the payroll of the Rockefellers. And then in 1997 he wrote another book called The Grand Chessboard. And much of what is now occurring and the demonization of Russia is effectively part of the script that Brzezinski outlines in The Grand Chessboard. And his musings in 97 were then picked up in 2000 by the Project for a New American Century in the document that they published in September of 2000 called Rebuilding America's Defenses. And it lays out the script for full spectrum dominance. So anyone who suggests that any of this is just rampant conspiracy, of course, hasn't done the research. And this is how people are prevented from doing their research, because the establishment goes, oh, you don't want to look at that, that's just rampant conspiracy. And of course, as long as you don't look at it, that's absolutely fine. It's when you look at it and you start to see for yourself how all the dots connect, then you start to realize that humanity is under a multi-pronged assault by socio-psychopathic global corporatists. And humanity is absolutely on the cusp. And it's either a case of wake the up, or condemn future generations to lives of such unimaginable, abject misery that their lives won't be worth living, which is perhaps what many are realizing anyway, which is why we're seeing such a massive increase in teen suicides. So you can either walk away from this and stick your head back in the sand, or you can do your own research and become part of the humanity team that is trying to recover the planet from the global corporatists who are intent on destroying it. And if you descend into apathy, then they will be destroying it with your acquiescence. Thanks for joining me today. If you can get to London today, to Fetter Lane, please do. If you can get to Bolsover this evening, to the Bolsover Assembly Rooms for a 7:30 start, I'll see you there. If not, join me tomorrow at 8:30 here on the live stream. Have a great day.